This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or daf, see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Gimel Amud Aleph in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 23a. This is the beginning of the third parak of Mesechet Sanhedrin. The Mishnah says, Dine Mamanis B'Shlosha, monetary cases are tried by three people. Zeb Borer Lo Echad, this one chooses one. V'Zeb Borer Lo Echad, and this one chooses one. We'll see the Gemara exactly what that means. Ushneyen Borin Lohen Od Echad, and then the two litigants together, they pick the last one. Divrei Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. Rashi explains that Zeb Borer Lo Echad, this one chooses one. Mashma, at this point in time, it seems to be saying, Zeb Borer Lo Bezdin Echad, that this litigant picks one Bezdin, Shehein Gimel, he picks three judges for the case. V'zeh Echad, and the other person also picks a court, a separate court. Harei Shisha, that's already a total of 6 judges. Ushneim Borin Lohem Od Echad, and then the two of them together pick a third court. Harei Tes, that would be 9 judges. V'hainu Dekam Etam, and that's why the Gemara asks on this, Mai Zeb Borer, what does it mean that each one is choosing an entire court? It's loss asagi, all you really need is 3 judges, but in any case, according to Rebbe Meir, this one chooses one, the other litigant chooses one, and then together they choose the last one, Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's Rebbe Meir's opinion. V'chachamim omrim, and the chachamim say, Shnei dayanin borin lohen od echad. For that third one, it's actually the 2 judges, not the 2 litigants that choose the last one. And the Mishnah continues, Zeh posel dayano shel zeh, this one can disqualify this one's judge, V'zeh posel dayano shel zeh, and the other one can disqualify the other one's judge. Divrei Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. The chachamim omrim, and the chachamim say, Emasai, when is that true? Bisman shemevi alei and raya, that's only if he brings evidence, shein krov and opsulin, that they're relatives or they're disqualified for some other reason. Avalim hayu ksherin, but if they're kosher, o mumchin mipi bezdin, or let's say they're considered experts from a bezdin, eino yachol aposel, and he's not able to disqualify them. Zeh posel edav shel zeh, the Mishnah continues, this litigant can disqualify the other one's witnesses. V'zeh posel edav shel zeh, and the other litigant can disqualify the other one's witnesses rather. Divrei Rebbe Meir, these are the words of Rebbe Meir. The chachamim omrim, and the chachamim say, Emasai, when is that true? Bisman shemevi alei and raya, that's only if he brings evidence, shein krov and opsulin, that their relatives are disqualified. Avalim hayu ksherin, but if they're kosher, eino yachol aposlan, he can't disqualify them. And the Gemara says, as Rashi mentioned, Mai zeh borer lo echad v'zeh borer lo echad. What does it mean that each one chooses an entire court? But tzlas asagi isn't enough with 3 people by monetary cases, 3 judges. And the Gemara answers, Hachi Kamer. This is what the Mishnah is saying. Kishazeh borer lo bezdin echad, when this litigant picks one bezdin, v'zeh borer lo bezdin echad, and the other litigant, he picks another bezdin, so shnein borin lohen od echad, so now they're arguing which bezdin, so now together they should pick one other bezdin. And the Gemara continues, V'afilu lo v'matzi ma'akev, but is this really true? Even a borrower is able to say that I don't like the court that you want to take me to. V'amar Rebbe Lazar, but Rebbe Lazar says, Lo shanu ela malva, that's only true by the lender. The lender can say, I don't want to go to the local court, we need to go further away for better experts. Avalova, but when it comes to a borrower, since we say that a lova is like a servant to a borrower is like a servant to the lender, so we force him, kovanoso, we force him v'dan be'ir, we force him to be judged in his local city. So is it really true that a lova is able to demand a different court? And the Gemara says, Kedamar Rabbi Yochanan, it's like Rabbi Yochanan says, Be'erchos shebeSuria, we're talking about the courts in Syria. Shanu, that's what we're talking about over here. Rabbi Yochanan said that in a different context. So Hachanami, so here also, Be'erchos shebeSuria Shanu, we're talking about the Erchos shebeSuria. They weren't such expert local courts, and that's why even a lova can ask to go to a different court. But the Gemara continues, Aval mumchin lo, but is it really true that if they're experts, he can't demand a different court? And the Gemara continues, Rapapa says, Afilu tema mumchin, you can even say, we're talking about an expert court, and the lova is able to demand a different court of experts, Kagon Beidina de Rav Huna de Rav Chisda, because we could be talking about in our Mishnah, where there's a court of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, which were in the same city. In that case, the borrower is able to say to the lender, Mika mitarach nalach, am I bothering you to go further away? I'm saying to choose a different local court that the lova is allowed to do. And Rashi explains, Hachi Kamar, this is what the Mishnah means to say, Kishazeh borer lo bezin echad, v'zeh borer lo bezin echad. If one litigant chooses one bezin, the other litigant chooses another bezin, v'chol echad posel oso bezin shabir chavero, and each litigant doesn't like the bezin that his friend selected, ve'eno rotze lado lafanav, he doesn't want to go to that court. So then what we do is, shnei and borin lohen echad, then the two of them together should choose a court they agree on. Kilomar ein yechon lochav zezeh. What the Mishnah is saying is, they can't force one another. Ela borin bezin sheisratzu bo shneim, they choose a bezdin which they both agree to. That's how the Gemara understands the Mishnah right now. The Gemara then asked, "Va'afilu lov matzi ma'akev bitmiya," but is that true that the borrower can reject the local court? V'amar Rebbe Elazar l'kamon b'sof pirkin, but Rebbe Elazar said later on at the end of the parak, "Lo shanu echad omer nidan kan v'echad omer nelech lebeis havad." You're only allowed to have a situation where one says we should do it locally and the other one says we should go to better experts further away. Kofan osova holech lebeis havad, and we say that we actually would force them to go to the beis havad. That's only true ela dekamar malvan elech lebeis havad. Only if the lender is the one that says we want to go to, that he wants to go to the beis havad. The eved lova l'ishmavel, like we said, an eved is like a servant, a lova rather, a borrower is like a servant to the malva, to the lender. And the Gemara then answered, Kedam Rabbi Yochanan l'kaman v'shmait, and Rabbi Yochanan says later on in a different context, Berchos shebesuria. We're talking about the courts of Surya. Shelo hayu bekiyin b'din Torah. These courts were not experts in the halachas of the Torah. Hilka chafilu lo v'matzi ma'akev. Therefore, in such a situation, even the borrower can refuse to go to those courts. And then the Gemara gave another answer, Beidina de Rav Huna v'Rav Chisda. We're talking in our Mishnah of the courts of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, that tarvayu b'chad makom. They're both in the same location, and so that's why the lova can demand to go to the other court. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, V'chachamim omrim, the Chachamim say, Shnei dayanin, borin lohen od echad. It's the two judges that select the last one. And so the Gemara now questions the approach that we took above. V'sa'al kadaitach kiduk amrina. Now, if you think that what the Mishnah means is what we said above, that each one chose a court that the other one rejected, and so then they find a court that they both agreed to, so then what does it mean? V'sa'al kadaitach kiduk amrina on bezdin. If you think that that's what we're talking about again, where they're each selecting a different court, and so then the Chachamim are saying that the two courts are going to select the third court. So Bezdin Basar de Pasli Lahu, so a court, after the litigant said that he doesn't trust that court, Azlu Ubeiru Lahu Beidina Achrini, now that court is going to go together, these two courts, which again, each litigant rejected one of these courts. Now the court is going to select a different court. If he doesn't trust this court, why would he trust the court to select a different court? So it doesn't make sense to interpret the Mishnah in that fashion. V'yod, and further, Mai Zeb Borelo Echad v'Zeb Borelo Echad. What does it mean that this one chooses one and that one chooses one, as if this has to be the halacha, this has to be the procedure? What the Mishnah really means, according to what you were saying, is that if one of them chooses a court that the other one doesn't like, but it doesn't mean that this is standard procedure. And so the Gemara instead interprets the Mishnah as follows, Elohachi Kama. Rather, the Mishnah is saying as follows, Kishezeh borer lo dayan echad, v'zeh borer lo dayan echad. When this one chooses one judge, and the other litigant chooses one judge, so then Shnei and borin lohen od echad, then the two of them together, they choose the third judge. That's the composition of the court that they will be using. And the Gemara says, why is it that they do it in this fashion? And the Gemara says, Amri b'ma'arava, they say in the West, Mishmei de Rav Zera, in the name of Rabbi Zera, Mitoch shezeh borer lo dayan echad v'zeh borer lo dayan echad. If you're going to allow one litigant to choose one of the judges, the other litigant to choose the other judge, Ushnei and borin lohen od echad, and then the two of them together choose the third judge, that's the best procedure, because Yotza hadin la'amito, then the judgment will proceed to be truthful. And Rashi explains, Yotza din emes la'amito will be a truthful judgment that Saisi ba'alei din in desavar hachayev harei ba'atzmi birarti echad. What it means to say truthful is that the litigants are going to listen, because the person who's chayev is going to say, well, I even chose one of the judges. And if he was able to find that I was in fact innocent, he would have done that. And also the judges, when they're selected in this fashion, they're going to make sure to look for who actually is the correct one, because they were picked by both of the litigants. So again, you're going to have a truthful judgment. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "V'chachamim omrim v'chulu," and the Chachamim say that the two judges, they choose the third judge. And the Gemara says, "Neima b'Rav Yehuda Marav kamiflagi." Let us say that they're arguing on the following statement from Rav Yehuda that says that Rav says, "Diyamar Rav Yehuda Marav," because Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, "Ein ha'edim chosman al ashtar elim ken yodin mi chosem imoyin." Edim do not sign a document unless they know who is signing with them. They want to make sure that the people signing with them are also kosher witnesses. And the Gemara now suggests Rabbi Meir lesled Rav Yehuda Marav. Rabbi Meir, he does not hold of what Rabbi Yehuda says from Rav, meaning to say, according to Rabbi Meir, you don't need the judge's consent, those two judges' consent on who is the third judge, because he does not agree with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Marav. For Rabbanan Islud, Rabbi Yehuda Marav, and the Rabbanan, they do hold of the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, and therefore, just like by a witness is not going to sign a document unless he knows who the other witness is, so too over here, you're going to need the input of the two judges in order to determine who the third judge judge is. And the Gemara says, Lo no, de kuli alma islu de Rav Yehuda Marav. It could be that everybody agrees with what Rav Yehuda says from Rav. V'das hadayonin kuli alma lo pligi de bainan. And it could be everybody agrees. Both Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim agree that you do need the consent of the other two judges in terms of who the third judge is. Ki pligi das balei dinim. The only machlokus between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim is, do you also need to have the consent of the litigants in terms of the third judge? Rabbi Meir savar das balei dinin nami bainan. Rabbi Meir holds we also need the consent of the litigants. That's what it means that they select that third judge. But of course, the two judges, they need to agree to serve together with that third judge. For Rabbanan Savri and the Rabbanan hold that das hadayonin ba'inan, we do need the consent of the two judges. However, das balei dinin lo ba'inan, we do not need the consent of the two litigants. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Ein ha'edim chosman al ashtar v'chula. Witnesses do not sign a document unless they know who else is signing with them. And the Gemara says, Tanya nami hachi. We have a brisa like this as well. Kach hayu nikiyei hadas sheb Yerushalayim osin. The scrupulous people of Yerushalayim, they used to do as follows. Lo hayu chosman al ashtar le'im ken yodin michosem imoin. They did not sign a document unless they know who is signing with them. V'lo hayu yoshvin bedin elim ken yodin miyoshev imoin. And they would not sit in judgment unless they know who's sitting in judgment with them. They would not enter for a meal unless they know who is reclining together with them. And Rashi explains, they don't enter a meal. It is a disgrace for Talmidei Chachamim that they should sit with Amei Haaretz at a meal. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Zeh posel dayano v'chulu. According to Rabbi Meir, a litigant can disqualify the judge that the other litigant brought. And the Gemara says, Kol kamine de posel daine. Is it really within the litigant's ability that he's able to disqualify a judge? Does that make sense? And the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Be'erchos shebesur yashana. We're talking about the courts in Syria. These were not expert judges. And in such a situation where they are not experts in the laws of the Torah, so there the litigant is able to disqualify the judge and say that I don't want to sit in front of him for judgment. And the Gemara says, Avol mumchim lo, but according to that, what are you suggesting? You're suggesting that if we're talking about a court of expert judges, so then you can't disqualify, the litigant cannot disqualify such a judge. But hamidaktani seifa, but from the fact that it says, at the end of the Mishnah, the opposing view in the Mishnah states as follows, the Chachamim say, Amosai, when is it possible to disqualify a judge? Bisman shemevi raya shein kroven upsulin, that's if you bring evidence that the person's a relative or disqualified. But if the judges are kosher or they are experts from Bezdin, so then it's not possible to disqualify. In other words, the Chachamim are responding to Rabbi Meir and saying that if the judge is an expert, you can't disqualify him. That would imply that Rabbi Meir is saying that you could disqualify an expert judge. It sounds like we're not just talking about erchos shebesuria. And the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar. This is what the Chachamim are responding. They're really saying as follows. Avolim hayu ksheir, and if these judges are kosher, nasu kimumchin mipi bezdin. It's as if they are experts from Bezdin. Ve'ino yachol aposlan, you can't disqualify them. In other words, we're not talking about judges that are actual experts. We just mean to say that the judges are considered to be like experts and they cannot be disqualified. And so again, according to that, you can say that Rabbi Meir was talking specifically about erchos shebesuria when he said that the litigant can disqualify the judge. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here a proof from the following brisa. Amru lo Rabbi Meir, they said to Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim responded to Rabbi Meir, lo kol heimenu sheposel dayan shemum chol rabim. A litigant does not have the power to disqualify a judge that's considered, that is an expert to the public. And so you see, we are talking about expert judges. And the Gemara says, Ema, rather, the way the brisa should be stated is as follows. It should have said as follows, lo kol heimenu sheposel dayan shemchu rabim alehem. What it means is that the litigant does not have the power to disqualify a judge which the public has accepted upon themselves. It's not that this judge actually was an expert judge, but the fact that the public has accepted this judge as a judge, so he has that status that he cannot be disqualified according to the Chachamim. And again, that would mean we are talking about erchos shebesuria, and there Rabbi Meir says that the litigant does have the power to disqualify that judge. And the Gemara continues, Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa like this as well, liolam posel v'holech, the litigant can continuously disqualify the judges that are brought forth by the other litigant, ad sheyikavel ola b'fnei bezin shemumcha l'rabim, until the litigant brings forth a judge that is actually a mumcha l'rabim, considered an expert for the public. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir, and so you see, according to Rabbi Meir, that the litigant can only disqualify judges that are not experts. But the Gemara continues, Va'edim, but what about witnesses? Kimumchin dami, they should have the same status as experts. V'yamer Rabbi Meir, and yet Rabbi Meir says, Zeh posel edav shel zeh, this litigant can disqualify this one's witnesses. V'zeh posel edav shel zeh, and the other one can disqualify the other one's witnesses. And Rashi explains, Va'edim kimumchin damu, edim are considered like experts, meaning im einam krovim opsulim, as long as they're not relatives or disqualified, they are considered to be the same as, let's say, an expert kind of a judge, and yet there is disqualification. And so you see Rabbi Meir is talking even about mumchin. And the Gemara says, Itmar Allah, it was stated on this statement of Rabbi Meir, that one can just disqualify the other one's witnesses. Amar Reish Lakish says, Pekadosh Yomar Davar Zeh, should a holy mouth like Rabbi Meir say such a thing? In other words, how is it possible that a litigant can disqualify the witnesses that are coming against him? It doesn't even make any sense to say such a thing. So what does Rabbi Meir mean when he says a litigant can disqualify the witnesses that are being brought against him? Tani Eido, what it really means is his witness. If you have a single witness, not two witnesses, but a single witness that is brought against him, that the litigant can disqualify. But the Gemara says that doesn't make sense either. Eido lamai, what do you mean a single witness? For what? Ileima lamaman, if we're talking about a single witness for a monetary case, rachmana pasle. So the Torah already says you need two witnesses to take money from someone. And ilashvu, if we're talking about a situation of bringing one witness to force that litigant to take an oath, so heimune mehemin kebeitrei. But again, one witness when it comes to an oath is like two witnesses when it comes to actually taking money from someone. So that is a perfectly acceptable idea to bring one witness. So why should you be able to disqualify the witness that the litigant is bringing against you? And so the Gemara says, Liolam lamaman. Really what we're talking about over here is that this litigant is bringing forth this one witness to try to get money from the other litigant. And lo tzricha, no, it's necessary to kible oleh kabeitrei. What happened over here is that this litigant who's defending himself, he accepted this one witness as though he was considered like two witnesses, and now he wants to go ahead and say he doesn't want to accept that. And so what's Rabbi Meir teaching? That he's able to retract, even though initially he said, I will accept one witness as though it's two witnesses, but the litigant is able to retract. That's what it means when Rabbi Meir says, Zeh posel edav shel zeh, and Zeh posel edav shel zeh. And the Gemara continues, Tanina, we learned in a Mishnah coming up, Amar lo nemon olai abba, nemon olai avicha, nemon in olai gimel roe bakar. Let's say one litigant says, I trust my father to be a judge, your father to be a judge, or I trust these three cattle herders to be a judge. Rabbi Meir Omer yachol lachzer bo. Rabbi Meir says he can retract what he said, even though initially he said he would trust them, he can take that back. V'chachamim omrim eino yachol lachzer bo, and the chachamim say he is not able to retract, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis.